So, over 750 years ago, St. Thomas Aquinas said of our friends and enemies, we must love them both, those whose opinions we share and those whose opinions we reject. For both have labored in the search of truth. Both have labored in the search of truth, and both have helped us in the finding of it. Now, it may be that the fact that I'm a Unitarian Universalist, influenced by our fourth principle, which speaks of the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, but with all due respect to St. Thomas, I think he should have spoken of responsibly laboring in search of the truth. Did those QAnon supporters who stormed the Capitol responsibly labor in the search for truth? And what about all those political pundits who claim they speak the truth? How responsible is their search for truth? And for Exhibit A, Rush Limbaugh died this week. Now, I hesitate to eulogize him for reasons you likely understand. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He was wildly successful financially as a radio host. There, I have said some kind of nice things. He was also, according to countless sources across the political spectrum, a leading voice in shaping the kind of right-wing extremism we experience today under the guise of speaking the truth. You know, I can draw a line from about 1990 when my step-grandmother pulled me aside to tell me about how all these marginalized groups were taking over and destroying the world. Where have you heard all of this? I asked. Rush Limbaugh, she said. He's the only one who tells the truth. So 30 years later, as I watched people descend upon the Capitol on January 6, people who believed they knew the truth, I remembered her words. 30 years of that kind of voice in the public sphere. And it's not just his voice, of course. It's a voice that helped open the door for similar voices. And certainly that shapes people. I don't know about you, but those people in this moment and time are the ones who, if I have to choose a name for them, I might call my enemies. Now, before anyone tunes out this morning because you think I might be headed down the road of telling you that there's unity available if we just empathize with all our enemies, no, that's not what I'm going to do here this morning. If there's anything this past year has taught us, has taught me, it's the importance of friends. I'd rather you put most of your energy into empathizing with friends or candidates for friends. Those people who buoy your spirit and give you reasons to keep waking up each day during this challenging year. Those people who work to dismantle systems of oppression and elevate the public discourse by inclusion and caring. We celebrate those friends this morning as we talk about what we do with our enemies. You know, the Christian message, very simply, is to love your enemies. And while I don't disagree in the broader sense, and we'll talk more about that in a moment, I think I actually prefer the Buddhist message when it comes to capturing some of the nuance of this conundrum. Be careful who your enemies are, the Buddhists say, for you can become just like them. This morning, I'm not going to ask that you have warm feelings for your enemies or speculate about what traumas might have shaped them. Instead, I'm going to say, it's okay if you feel like you have enemies right now. It's okay if you are sitting in judgment of some people's words and actions. Some people's words and actions are deserving of that kind of judgment right now. It's okay. What we're going to do instead this morning is take a little look about what our faith tradition says about our enemies, what drives them, and what we do with the knowledge of what drives them. So as our worship associate read, I chose a reading this morning from James Luther Adams. We'll call him JLA for short. And a lot of people do because he was perhaps the best known UU theologian of the 20th century. His work is informed by his witness of human evil during World War II, and because, well, he gets real about what it means to be human. One thing he doesn't do is ignore the drivers of our enemies' words and deeds. JLA speaks of what he calls the tyrants in the human soul. Now, these are those libido drives toward domination, when he says that it cannot be denied that religious liberalism has neglected these aspects of human nature in its zeal to proclaim the spark of divinity in humanity. Now, we may call these tendencies by any name we wish, but we do not escape their destructive influence by a conspiracy of silence concerning them. So, in other words, we can call our enemies insurrectionists or political pundits or nut jobs. We can feel that we are not them. Their hates and passions are distinct from us, and in one way, we are absolutely correct. At the same time, the deepest drivers in these people, the most base desires to satisfy selfish instincts, to do whatever we can do to put fear away from us, those are not theirs alone. We all share them. And I think what JLA is saying is until we own our own capacity for evil, we will never understand that which others do. So, for example, I went ahead and listened to a bit of Rush Limbaugh to prepare for this sermon. It's been years since I really heard his voice. I wanted to make sure that the things he said were as bad as I remembered, and they were. They are. I did the dirty work, so you don't have to. I listened to him make fun of gay men dying of AIDS at the height of the AIDS crisis, of calling women who wanted access to birth control names I will not repeat here, of characterizing people of color in broad racist strokes. But I have to tell you, something else emerged from listening to him. I heard something that attracted me, at least some part of me, on some level. Now, is that easy to admit? No. I mean, maybe it's easier to admit because I'm sitting in front of a camera in my living room and I don't have to be in the same room with all of you and see your faces with that statement. But I have to say, there was something about his extravagant certainty, his sarcasm, his constant outrage that, well, it made my blood boil, was also strangely invitational. The invitation said, if I could just set aside my moral compass, if I could just ignore the content of these words, there was an implicit invitation there that said, I too could join in the fun. I could look down on other people. I could be outraged to the point that I don't have to think about my own real feelings. I could be part of that. Now, the point is, I wouldn't have heard this unspoken invitation if these drivers weren't also somewhere within me. Now, I'm not saying that I or you are the same as this person, far from it, because it's what we do with our lives that makes us friends rather than enemies. It's not the more base instincts we might have somewhere at our core that define us. We all have the capacity to be small-minded, nasty, self-serving, and hateful. And yet this is not a treatise on how I am my enemy or how you are, that ultimately we are all the same. I'm not saying that. I don't believe that's true. What I'm saying here is that we are connected to our enemies by two significant things. One, that we share some of the same lesser impulses and capacity to do wrong. And two, that we are all part of the human family. This does not mean that we simply forgive and forget. What positioning ourselves honestly in this way does is remind us that we are both part of the problem and part of the solution. We are part of the solution because we know our enemy better than we think we do, better than we often like to admit. This is why JLA speaks of caritas in our reading today, the caring for the creative forces of life as they express themselves in another being. We love someone's ultimate meaning, which transcends the choices they have made and who they might be at the present moment. This, of course, points back to our first Unitarian Universalist principle, the one in which we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. That word inherent, oh, it's so important there, because this is about the worth we all share simply by being human beings. It's saying that there are some things owed to all of us to the end of our days because of that inherent worth. No one should be tortured. No one should be without access to food, water, healthcare, etc. But so too do we not have an obligation to like one another or approve of one another's actions. We have the right to have enemies. And at the same time, some part of us also has to look at our enemies through a lens of caritas, a love that invites us to see the bigger picture of our interconnected lives playing out here on earth. So all of this speaks to the complexity of liberal religion, which will continue to baffle and frustrate many, perhaps even some of you this morning, because we offer few answers here. Because our primary work is lifting up the ambiguity of life, humanity, and any conception we might have of the divine. The only certainty we provide is uncertainty, which I'm afraid that may feel like bad news after a year of a pandemic, civil unrest, conspiracy campaigns, toxic leadership. I was just reading this morning that the rising cost of food in this nation, along with the rising rates of hunger, uncertainty as a theological choice can feel less than grounding, less than comforting. If only I could just tell you, forgive and forget, or turn the other cheek, and our work here was done. But this is not what we have signed up for by being Unitarian Universalist. Two names joined together in the 1950s after centuries of anti-establishment thinking and behavior. By coming together as UUs, we've acknowledged that we don't think there is only one theological narrative that works for all people. By coming together, we acknowledge that truth exists. Science is real. People are flawed, but capable of being better than they often are. We don't offer an opportunity to literally bathe in the waters of Unitarian Universalism, to emerge clean and free of old sins. We recognize accountability, and that when someone does something wrong, there has to be a process for making amends. And when whole systems are wrong, that complicated, messy work has to be done to build systems that are just. And over all this hangs the notion that whatever we do, however bad we might be, or some of us might be at any given point, we still hold some value and worth in our humanity. None of this is easy, and none is particularly satisfying on a Sunday morning when we might just want to get concrete answers for once. So where does this leave me with my enemies? Where does it leave you? Most of my enemies these days are on a larger stage. Those political pundits who say things that have added misery to my life, or politicians who pass policies that hurt the lives of people or groups I care about. Yet there are a few enemies who are personal to just me. Guy who bullied me in school, or a friend who hurt me seemingly purposefully when I was most in need, the supervisor who actively worked to undermine my self-worth, Now, it's likely you can list a few people who feel like enemies in your own life. I hope your list isn't too long. There's nothing I know for myself that I need to go and do with or get from these people. And I think it's okay that I still sit in judgment of their behavior. But to love them, well, it helps when I think of love and hate as conscious choices with intentions versus feelings I'm just riding like a roller coaster. In other words, what do I want to spend my time doing? Loving or hating? Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, "We never get rid of an enemy by meeting hate with hate. We get rid of an enemy by getting rid of enmity." By its very nature, love creates and builds up. Love transforms with redemptive power. So it takes some time and effort and intention for sure, but I'm working within myself to make sure that my enemies are loved by me in this broad sense of love, because they are part of the human story. And they remind me that we can do better, that I can do better. And because all of their enemy behaviors are also things that I have engaged in as the perpetrator at some point in my life. Circumstances were different, the degree of behavior might have been different, but I recognize at least little pieces of myself in them. I can't fully hate them because if I do that, I'd be hating myself, and I know that's a road to nowhere. So I'll love them for their humanity, from what they might have done with it, and for what they teach me about people and myself. And I'll disapprove of what they've done and work against this sort of behavior. And I don't have to like them. You don't have to like them. So all this leads to where we are now, February 21st, 2021. We are in a nation that has not traded in these distinct lines between friends and enemies so clearly in a very long time. Perhaps it was last during the civil rights era, maybe even the Civil War before that, I don't know. But this is truly a moment that we are living in, a moment when it feels like us and them. And I'm here to say it really is us and them. There really are friends and enemies. I don't have any illusions that my enemies will someday be my friends. I'm open to it if it happens, but I'm not hanging my hopes there. My hopes rest with my friends. And yet, ugh, here it comes. The paradoxical nature of the liberal religious perspective, which can drive us up the wall. We are still one human family consisting not just of friends, but also enemies. We cannot help but affect one another. That's terrible, isn't it? We have to try and hold all that at once. To have enemies who we reject as part of our intimate world and also see them as part of the same human family we are all part of and, yes, intimately connected to. I have to be grateful for this faith tradition that asks me to do that, that asks this level of complexity of me, because it also gives me freedom. Freedom to hold more than one idea at once, freedom to feel what I feel, and also open myself up to consciously make choices, some that might even seem contradictory, but ultimately help me to expand myself as a human being. And this freedom is good because I don't know about you, but I'm not sure what I feel most days these days. How are you doing is a loaded question lately. Am I happy or sad? Yes. Am I grieving or celebrating? Yes. Am I angry or peaceful? Yes. There are ultimately a few truths I do hold on to, and one is this: all that I am is welcome here, in this faith tradition, in this life. And that goes for you too, of course. All that you are, all you feel and carry and hold is welcome here, in this faith tradition, in this life. Even when it's messy, even when it hurts, even when you can't even name it, you are welcome here in this life that we share together, with all you bring to it, with all you think and feel. You are welcome here. You are a friend.